The sound of shattering glass pierced through the lively chatter of the crowded bar, causing Emma Holloway to snap her attention away from her half-finished mojito. Across the room, a tall man with broad shoulders had his hands raised in a pacifying gesture, while a woman with fire in her eyes jabbed an accusatory finger into his chest, her voice rising above the suddenly hushed conversations. "You think you can just move on like nothing happened?" The woman shouted, her blonde hair whipping around as she gestured wildly. "After everything we built together." Emma knew she should mind her own business. She'd come to McCafferty's to unwind after a grueling week of teaching second graders, but something about the man's expression, a mixture of resignation and discomfort, tugged at her conscience. He wasn't fighting back, just absorbing the verbal assault with stoic dignity. When the angry woman grabbed a fresh drink from a nearby table and appeared ready to throw it, Emma's body moved before her mind could catch up. In 3 quick strides, she was between them, facing the furious blonde. "Hey, I think that's enough," Emma said, her voice calm but firm. "Maybe it's time to cool down before someone gets hurt." The woman's eyes widened in shock before narrowing dangerously. "Who the hell are you?" His new flavor of the month. Emma felt heat rise to her cheeks but held her ground. "I'm just someone who doesn't want to see this escalate. The whole bar is watching, and I'm guessing this isn't how you want to be remembered here." For a tense moment, Emma thought the woman might redirect her rage, but then the blonde's gaze darted around the room, taking in the curious onlookers. Her shoulders slumped slightly. "He's not worth it anyway," she spat, shooting a venomous look at the man behind Emma before storming toward the exit. As the door slammed behind the departing woman, the bar's atmosphere gradually returned to normal. Emma turned to face the stranger she'd defended, finding herself looking up into startlingly blue eyes set in a handsome, if somewhat tired, face. "Thank you," he said, his deep voice carrying a hint of surprise. "That was unexpected but appreciated. I'm Gabriel Harrington." "Emma Holloway," she replied, suddenly feeling awkward now that the adrenaline was fading. "Sorry for butting in. It just looked like it was about to get messy." Gabriel's lips curved into a genuine smile that transformed his serious expression. "Trust me, your intervention was welcome." "Can I buy you a drink as thanks?" Emma hesitated. She'd promised herself a quiet evening, but there was something intriguing about Gabriel, a certain gravitas that suggested depth beyond his obvious good looks. "Sure," she found herself saying, "but just one. I have 20 second graders waiting for me bright and early tomorrow." "A teacher," Gabriel said, leading her to a quieter corner of the bar. "That explains the fearless crowd control." Emma laughed, a warm, spontaneous sound that made Gabriel's smile widen. As they settled at a small table, neither of them realized that this chance encounter was about to change both their lives in ways they couldn't imagine. Gabriel ordered them both drinks, another mojito for her and a neat whiskey for himself, and they fell into surprisingly easy conversation. Emma found herself charmed by his attentiveness. He asked thoughtful questions about her teaching and actually listened to her answers, a refreshing change from most of her recent dates. "So, what do you do?" Emma eventually asked, realizing they'd been talking about her for nearly 20 minutes. A fleeting expression crossed Gabriel's face, something between reluctance and resignation. "I run a company," he said simply. "What kind of company?" Emma pressed, genuinely curious. "Harrington Maritime Industries," he replied, watching her reaction carefully. "We build specialized ships and marine equipment." Emma nodded, the name vaguely familiar but not setting off any particular alarms. "Sounds complicated. Do you enjoy it?" Gabriel looked momentarily surprised by her response, or rather, the lack of reaction he seemed to have expected. "Most days," he admitted, "though some aspects of the job are isolating, like having dramatic confrontations with ex-girlfriends in public places." Emma suggested with a small smile, trying to lighten the moment. Gabriel winced but chuckled. "Cassandra and I dated for about 6 months. She worked in PR for a partner company. I ended things when I realized she was more interested in the lifestyle than in me personally." He took a sip of his whiskey. Tonight was the first I've seen her since the breakup 2 months ago. Well, she certainly made an impression, Emma said dryly. Not the kind I prefer. Gabriel's eyes held hers. I'm usually much more careful about who I spend time with now. There was a weighted quality to his words that made Emma's pulse quicken. She became suddenly aware of how close they were sitting, how the bar's dim lighting softened his features, highlighting the strong line of his jaw and the warmth in his eyes. "And what about you?" he asked softly. "No knight in shining armor rushing in to defend you from interfering strangers." Emma smiled, tracing her finger around the rim of her glass. "No knights, shining or otherwise, for almost a year now. My last relationship ended when he decided teaching wasn't ambitious enough for his future wife material." She rolled her eyes. "His words, not mine." "Sounds like an idiot," Gabriel said matter-of-factly. "He was," Emma agreed. "But educational in his own way, taught me what I don't want." "And what do you want, Emma Holloway?" Gabriel's question was gentle but direct. Emma considered for a moment. "Authenticity," she finally said. "Someone who sees the world clearly and honestly. Someone who values what I do because it matters, not because it looks good on paper." She laughed self-consciously. "Sorry, that got deep fast." "Don't apologize," Gabriel said, his expression thoughtful. "It's refreshing to have a real conversation." The bartender called last call, breaking their moment. Emma glanced at her watch and was shocked to see it was nearly 1 a.m. "I should go," she said reluctantly. "Those second graders won't teach themselves." Gabriel nodded but hesitated as they both stood. "I'd like to see you again, Emma. Properly, not just as the guy you saved from a drink to the face." Emma felt a flutter of excitement mingled with caution. There was something about Gabriel, a hint of complexity and perhaps even vulnerability beneath his confident exterior that intrigued her. Still, she'd been burned before. "I'd like that," she found herself saying, surprising even herself with her certainty. They exchanged numbers, and Gabriel insisted on calling her a cab. As they waited outside the bar, the cool night air filled with possibilities, Gabriel gently touched her elbow. "Thank you again," he said softly. "Not many people would step in like that for a stranger." "Maybe I just have a thing for lost causes," Emma teased, but her smile was kind. "Is that how you see me, a lost cause?" There was a glint in Gabriel's eye that suggested he was far from that. "I guess I'll find out, won't I?" Emma replied as her cab pulled up to the curb. Gabriel opened the door for her, his hand briefly touching hers as she slid inside. The contact sent a small electric current up her arm. "Good night, Emma Holloway," he said, his voice a gentle rumble. "Good night, Gabriel Harrington," she replied, surprised by the reluctance she felt to leave. As the cab pulled away, Emma couldn't help but look back. Gabriel stood watching her departure, a tall silhouette against the neon lights of the bar, and somehow she knew that this night had marked the beginning of something significant. The following morning came much too early. Emma stifled a yawn as 20 energetic 7-year-olds filed into her classroom, their voices creating a cheerful cacophony that usually energized her. Today, though, her mind kept drifting to blue eyes and a warm smile. "Miss Holloway, are you okay?" little Zoe asked during arts and crafts. "You keep smiling at nothing." Emma felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I'm just happy about the wonderful animals you're all creating," she deflected, gesturing to the papier-mâché creatures taking shape around the room. It was during her lunch break that her phone buzzed with a message from Gabriel. "Hoping your students are being kind to their sleep-deprived teacher today. Would you be free for dinner tomorrow night?" Emma smiled, warmth spreading through her chest as she typed her reply. "They're showing more mercy than they know, and yes to dinner." "Where and when?" His response came quickly. "I know a place by the harbor. 7 p.m. I'll send a car." Emma hesitated at that last part. A car service seemed extravagant, but perhaps it was normal in his world. Running a maritime company must be more lucrative than she'd initially thought. "I can drive myself," she countered. "Just send the address." There was a longer pause before his next message. "Independent, I like that." Address incoming, but the offer stands if you change your mind. The next evening, Emma spent more time than usual getting ready. She finally settled on a deep green dress that brought out the gold flecks in her hazel eyes, comfortable enough for a relaxed dinner but elegant enough for somewhere upscale. The restaurant, Meridian, turned out to be perched on a cliff overlooking the harbor, its glass walls offering breathtaking panoramic views of the water. As Emma gave her name to the maitre d', she noticed how his demeanor shifted immediately. "Of course, Miss Holloway." "Mr. Harrington is already seated. Please follow me." She was led through the elegant space to a secluded table where Gabriel rose as she approached. He looked even more handsome than she remembered, dressed in a tailored navy suit that emphasized his broad shoulders. "You look beautiful," he said simply as she reached the table. "Thank you," Emma replied, suddenly feeling a bit out of her depth. The restaurant was clearly high-end, with prices to match based on the discreet menu she glanced at as she sat down. Gabriel must have noticed her scanning the menu because he smiled gently. "I hope you don't mind, but I took the liberty of arranging a tasting menu with the chef. He's an old friend and he likes to show off when I bring someone special here." "Someone special," Emma echoed, raising an eyebrow. "Is that what I am? You stepped between me and a potentially drink-ruining situation with zero hesitation," Gabriel replied with a twinkle in his eye. "That automatically qualifies you as special in my book," Emma laughed, relaxing a bit. "Well, when you put it that way." The evening unfolded with an ease that surprised her. Gabriel was attentive but never overbearing, sharing stories about growing up in a coastal town with a father who built boats and a mother who taught literature. Emma found herself opening up about her own childhood as an only child to academic parents who had been baffled but supportive of her decision to teach young children. "Why ships?" Emma asked as they shared a decadent chocolate dessert, the harbor lights twinkling below them. "What drew you to that industry specifically?" Gabriel's expression softened with genuine passion. "The sea has always been in my blood. My grandfather was a merchant marine, my father built custom sailboats. I grew up surrounded by water and ships." He paused, swirling the wine in his glass. "But it was more than family legacy. Ships connect worlds, they're engineering marvels that bridge divides. What we build at Harrington helps move everything from essential medicine to food across oceans. There's purpose in that." "I can hear it in your voice," Emma said softly. "You really love what you do." "Most aspects of it," Gabriel admitted. "The actual building and design work, absolutely. The corporate politics and social obligations." He shrugged. "Less so." "Hence the dramatic X," Emma supplied with a small smile. "Hence the dramatic X," he agreed. "The position comes with expectations about who you should associate with, who makes a suitable partner." His gaze held her steadily. "I've learned to be wary of people who are more interested in what I represent than who I am." Emma tilted her head, suddenly curious. "And what exactly do you represent, Gabriel Harrington? You mentioned running a company, but I get the feeling there's more to it than that." A shadow of something hesitation, perhaps, crossed his face. "Harrington Maritime Industries is one of the largest private shipbuilders on the East Coast. We specialize in custom vessels for both private and government contracts." He paused. "As CEO, I'm the public face of that operation." Emma blinked, the pieces falling into place. The restaurant's deferential service, the offer of a car, his comments about expectations. "You're not just running a company," she said slowly. "You're running your company." Gabriel nodded, watching her carefully. "Does that change things?" Emma considered the question honestly. Did it? The man across from her was still the same person who'd listened attentively to her stories about second-grade chaos, who'd laughed genuinely at her jokes, whose eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. "It explains a few things," she finally said. "But no, it doesn't change anything important." The relief in Gabriel's eyes was unmistakable. "You'd be surprised how rarely I hear that." After dinner, they walked along a private pathway that wound down toward a small, secluded beach. The night air was cool but not cold, carrying the salt tang of the ocean. "I wanted to bring you here," Gabriel said as they reached the sand. "This stretch of beach is where my father taught me to sail. It's always been a place of clarity for me." Emma slipped off her heels, letting her feet sink into the cool sand. "It's beautiful," she said, gazing out at the moonlight reflecting off the gentle waves. "When things get overwhelming at work, when I'm drowning in spreadsheets and board meetings, I come here to remember why I do what I do." Gabriel stood close beside her, their shoulders almost touching. "The sea doesn't care about stock prices or quarterly reports. It just is." There was something deeply appealing about this side of him, the man who sought refuge in nature, who carried his family's legacy with both pride and thoughtfulness. "What about you?" Gabriel asked. "Where do you go when teaching gets overwhelming?" Emma smiled. "There's this little bookstore downtown with a reading nook in the children's section. Sometimes I curl up there with a picture book and remember why stories matter, why imagination is worth protecting." She laughed softly. "Not quite as dramatic as your ocean vista, but just as meaningful," Gabriel said seriously. He turned to face her, the moonlight silvering his features. "Emma, I know we've only just met, but there's something about you that feels." He searched for the right word, real, grounding. "I'd like to see where this could go." Emma's heart quickened. There was an intensity to his gaze that should have intimidated her, but instead made her feel seen in a way she rarely experienced. "I'd like that too," she said honestly. "Though I should warn you, my life is significantly less glamorous than yours. More finger paint, less fine dining." Gabriel's smile was warm as he reached for her hand, his fingers interlacing with hers. "Finger paint sounds refreshing, actually." The touch of his hand sent warmth spreading up Emma's arm. When he leaned down, his intention clear, she rose to meet him. Their first kiss was gentle, almost questioning, but it sparked something deep and certain within her. When they broke apart, Gabriel rested his forehead against hers. "I should get you home," he said reluctantly. "Probably," Emma agreed, though she made no move to step away. Gabriel drove her home himself in a sleek but understated car, insisting on walking her to her door. Her apartment building was modest but well-maintained. Nothing like what he must be used to, but he showed no sign of judgment. At her door, he kissed her again, a lingering promise of more to come. "I'll call you tomorrow," Emma nodded, reluctant to end the evening. "I'd like that." As she closed her door behind him, Emma leaned against it, her mind whirling. She'd just had dinner with a CEO, walked on a private beach, and experienced one of the most perfect kisses of her life. It felt surreal, like something from someone else's story, certainly not the life of Emma Holloway, second-grade teacher who usually spent Friday nights grading papers and watching documentaries. Yet as she got ready for bed, she realized that what had drawn her to Gabriel wasn't his status or wealth, but the genuine connection they'd shared. The way he listened, the passion he had for his work, his thoughtfulness. If he'd been a fellow teacher or a local shopkeeper, those qualities would have been just as appealing. The question was whether a man like Gabriel Harrington, with all the complexities and demands of his position, could truly fit into her world or she into his. Over the following weeks, Emma was surprised to discover that the answer seemed to be yes. Gabriel integrated himself into her life with thoughtful consideration, never trying to overwhelm or change her routine. He brought coffee to her apartment on Sunday mornings, joining her as she prepared lesson plans. He listened with genuine interest to her stories about classroom triumphs and challenges. For her part, Emma found herself increasingly comfortable in glimpses of his world. She met his executive assistant, Layla, when stopping by his office to bring him lunch during a day of back-to-back meetings. She attended a charity gala as his date, navigating the unfamiliar social waters with her natural warmth and authenticity. "You're a breath of fresh air," commented Alina, an older woman on Gabriel's board of directors, after Emma had frankly admitted she knew nothing about yacht racing. "This company needs more people who aren't afraid to say what they don't know." Not everything was smooth sailing, of course. 3 months into their relationship, Emma arrived at an industry dinner to overhear Cassandra Gabriel's ex telling a group of people that Gabriel was clearly having a charitable phase with his kindergarten teacher project. Emma had frozen, hurt blooming in her chest when Gabriel's voice cut through the moment. "Actually," he said coolly, appearing at Emma's side and taking her hand firmly in his, "Emma teaches second grade, not kindergarten, and she's not a project, she's the woman I love." The declaration, made publicly and without hesitation, left Emma momentarily speechless. Later that night, in the privacy of his car, she finally found her voice. "Did you mean what you said?" she asked quietly. "About loving me," Gabriel took her face gently between his hands. "I've been waiting for the right moment to tell you," he said, his voice low and certain. "But yes, Emma, I love you. I think I started falling the moment you stepped between me and certain disaster at that bar." Emma's heart swelled. "I love you too," she whispered against his lips. Their lives continued to intertwine in increasingly meaningful ways. Gabriel became a regular guest reader in Emma's classroom, delighting her students with animated renditions of adventure stories. Emma helped him redecorate his too-formal penthouse, adding warmth and personality to spaces that had been designed to impress rather than comfort. 6 months into their relationship, Gabriel invited Emma to join him for a weekend at his family's coastal home. It was there, after a day spent sailing and exploring tide pools, that he brought her to a secluded cove as the sun was setting. "My parents had their first date here," he told her, spreading a blanket on the sand. "My father proposed to my mother in this exact spot." Emma's heart began to race as Gabriel took her hands in his. "Emma Holloway," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion evident in his eyes, "you walked into my life at exactly the right moment. You saw me, not my position or my company, but me. You've brought light and laughter and purpose to parts of my life I didn't even realize had grown dark." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box, then knelt before her on the sand. "I want to build a life with you," he continued, opening the box to reveal a stunning yet tasteful emerald ring surrounded by small diamonds. "One that honors both our worlds and creates something new and beautiful together. Will you marry me?" Tears sprang to Emma's eyes as joy filled her chest. "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Yes, I'll marry you." The ring slid perfectly onto her finger, and as Gabriel stood to pull her into his arms, Emma was struck by the beautiful irony of their beginning. She had stepped in to defend a stranger from his past, never imagining she was meeting her future. Their wedding, held the following spring, perfectly balanced their two worlds. The ceremony took place on the beach near Gabriel's family home, intimate and meaningful with just their closest friends and family. Emma's second graders formed an adorable honor guard, tossing flower petals with more enthusiasm than precision. For their honeymoon, they sailed along the Mediterranean coast on a small yacht. Gabriel had designed himself luxurious enough for comfort, but small enough to be handled by just the two of them, allowing for privacy and adventure in equal measure. When they returned, they moved into a charming house halfway between Emma's school and Gabriel's office, not the imposing mansion many expected, but a warm home with character and a garden where Emma could grow flowers and vegetables. A year into their marriage, Gabriel surprised Emma by announcing a new initiative at Harrington Maritime, a foundation dedicated to educational programs that would bring maritime science and environmental awareness to underserved schools. "You inspired this," he told her as they reviewed the plans together. "Seeing the world through your eyes reminded me that the greatest legacy isn't just in what we build, but in who we help to grow." Emma, who had just discovered she was pregnant with their first child, felt her heart overflow with love for this man who continued to surprise her with his depth and generosity. "Speaking of growing things," she said with a smile, taking his hand and placing it gently on her still flat stomach, "we're going to need to make room for someone new." The look of wonder that spread across Gabriel's face was something Emma would treasure forever. As he gathered her into his arms, his joy palpable in the gentle way he held her, Emma reflected on the strange and beautiful path that had led them here. A shattered glass, an angry ex, and a split-second decision to step between a stranger and trouble. Such a small moment to have altered the course of two lives so completely. "What are you thinking about?" Gabriel murmured against her hair. "How sometimes the best journeys begin when we least expect them," Emma replied, leaning into his embrace. "And how glad I am that I decided to go to that bar that night." "Me too," Gabriel said softly, "though I'm still not sure what I did to deserve having you walk into my life." Emma smiled up at him. Maybe it was just meant to be the teacher and the shipbuilder finding harbor in each other. As Gabriel kissed her, his hand still protectively covering the place where their child grew, Emma knew with absolute certainty that some risks like defending strangers in bars were worth taking. For they sometimes led to the greatest adventures of all. Finding your way home to a love you never expected, but somehow always knew you were searching for. In the years that followed, as their family grew to include twin boys with their father's blue eyes and their mother's warm smile, Emma and Gabriel would occasionally return to McCafferty's bar, raising a toast to chance encounters and the courage to step into the unknown. And each time they left with the same certainty that sometimes the most powerful navigation tools aren't compasses or stars, but the simple willingness to see someone clearly, to defend them fiercely, and to love them completely no matter where the journey might lead.